Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to see you all, and I think we've all enjoyed beating the Bangalore traffic, leaving early in the morning and getting here early, right? It was a beautiful drive, actually, except for a little bit of KR Puram, but otherwise was wonderful. And as I was driving here, I honestly feel a little bit of part of the furniture fixture at nasscom events, have been here over so many years, as have many of you. So the excitement is about seeing and meeting so many of familiar faces, so many old friends, to come together and deliberate, share, learn about where the world of GCCs are heading. At one level, I heard people say, oh, more of the same, but not really. I really think it's been evolving year after year after year. I've been here, I would say, at least the last 5 years at the nasscom GCC conclave, and when one looks at it, every year the model has undone a few things and redone a few things. I remember a few years ago when bots were trending, that nasscom conclave, everyone was, oh, I've done 1,000 bots, I've done 3,000 bots. Look at where that was, look at what's trending today. We've come a long way and there's a lot changing. In fact, I do want to kick off with this slide. Like you all know, these are 2 articles that went viral last week, and I couldn't resist putting them up, right? This brain power flex is India's best kept secret. Firstly, I don't agree it's a secret. I think the world's eyes are on the GCC model, on India, and where we are all heading. And we continue to drive and attract global C-suite in hordes coming into the country to understand, evaluate, and set up established centers here. But it drew a lot of attention. It spoke of the trajectory. Later, at the end of the nasscom event, we will see that trajectory get revised. We've, of course, heard the government talk about bringing in the next 900 to 1,000 over the next 4 or 5 years. So we know that these centers are coming up at a pace of 1 center every week, 10 days, and that's going to continue for sure. So clearly, we are in very, very exciting times. The scale, the growth continues at an amazing trajectory. The second article, will the next Satya Nadella sit out of India? Again, an article that grabbed a lot of eyeballs. What is that really saying to us? It actually talks about the journey of evolution and why GCCs are really at the core of innovation, design, and steering where the future is. So 2 kind of different articles, but reiterate and corroborate the story of growth, the story of innovation, and the story of where we are heading next. So with that little backdrop, thank you. Our session today is really focusing on, while we are all so bullish and so charged to launch into the next phase of growth, we do need to keep an eye out for what are some of the emerging risks, what are some of the challenges, and let's talk a little about it. Why shy away from it? The truth is that GCCs are working extremely well to equip themselves to deal with it, and that's what we're going to talk about. Later this afternoon, we're going to release this little paper which we've worked with nasscom on to talk about what are these emerging risks, how are organizations and GCCs already gearing up to deal with it, and with a few frameworks. It's a brief paper, it's not an elaborate study, and we'll take you through what it's really going to talk about. By the way, and like in most sessions, we start with saying keep your phones away. I have a slightly different request, and I'm going to ask you to get your phones out, please. Because what I need you to do, and indulge us in this, because this is meant to be a masterclass, it's not meant to be a monologue. Would love to interact, get your views. So click and keep that Mentimeter handy. Show me a thumbs up if you've managed to log in, because I need you to do that. So of course, while you have your phones on, the other request would be to try and stay to the session. Don't toggle between Instagram and WhatsApp, please. So it would be great if we had your attention, because we do need you to participate. Everyone up there on Menti? Okay, super. All right, so to get this started, and I'm going to open just to get us warmed up, let's start with the first question that we have for you and would love to hear your responses. What are the key levers which ensure that India continues to be the top destination to establish GCCs? May seem like a no-brainer, but you'll know in a minute why I have this question up there. So please, let me see your responses. Talent at scale, cost advantage, tech advancement, startup ecosystem, ease of doing business, infrastructure. There could be a few others, but these are some of the top reasons why India is up there on the map. Give us a quick sense of your responses on this, please. And as soon as we have a certain number, I'll request Henna to display the results. Superb. Okay. Pay attention to this because this is part of what we're going to talk about. With one new GCC coming in every week, every 10 days, everyone rushing for a similar talent pool, niche talent, we could publish a dictionary of the top, a glossary, sorry, of the top 10, 15 skills that everyone's after. So there is a war for talent. Everyone's in a crazy, frantic pace adopting new tech and discovering new areas. So we're going to talk a little about this. These very levers of growth and what brings people to India need to be watched out for. And it's critical that you navigate these so you continue to play to the advantage that they present to you. Yeah? You with me? Okay. So let's move on. Another quick question. What are your top-of-the-mind risk challenges to build and sustain future growth? This is a word cloud. We need you to just type, when you think of growth over the next 3 to 5 years, for your GCC, what's the top-of-the-mind challenge? Or what do you think needs addressing? Talent, skill available, strategy, geopolitical infrastructure. Nice, very nice. Let's see a few more words. We have a big room, so I'd love to see more. Strategic focus, innovation, lot around talent. As you know, the size of the font demonstrates how many of you are typing the same theme. So clearly, talent is at the center of it, and we will spend a little more time on talent. It's not without reason that you may find this a little biased to the talent risk. All right. Okay, this is superb. So we have those top risks. You can see them. They're out there for you to see. So with that backdrop, you got a sense of what risks are there, what are we working towards. Now let's dive into what was this paper that we've published with NASSCOM, what was the survey all about, and we're going to take you through some key dimensions of that. Okay. All right. So what did the survey tell us? By the way, it was a representative dipstick survey. We covered about 75 to 100 GCCs, but we made sure they represent every industry vertical, from BFSI to the more recent private equity, life sciences to auto engineering, CPG, retail, energy, all of it. We covered scale. So we covered those who are at 55,000 headcount to those who are setting up 200 people strong GCCs to start with. We covered scope, everything from finance, HR, IT to the niche analytics hubs that are being set up in the country to blockchain hubs that are being set up. So we covered scope. And we covered maturity. GCCs who've been around for 25 years and those who are 2-year-olds. So it's a very representative survey. Those are the top risks that emerged. If you look at it, managing talent, and like you all also just confirmed, talent risk was the top theme that emerged, and we will delve into some dimensions of what talent is because it's a very broad subject. Leveraging technology. So while, of course, it's a huge opportunity, and we will take you through this because all of these, by the way, are opportunities at one level when you look at it from one lens. Don't forget our starting slide. That was the reason why people are coming to India. But you need to navigate through this while keeping the risks and challenges that these pose before us. Yeah? Ensuring regulatory compliance, go back, and addressing concentration concerns. So we're going to talk about each of these and get into some detail. The first one is talent. Talent, the very reason why GCCs continue to come to India, like you may have all seen, it's no longer cost arbitrage. What is one talking about? Talent arbitrage. That's the new theme. The one thing that happens in these conferences, you'll go back with some new jargon, some new terms. So make a note, it's now all about talent arbitrage. That's a big one, yeah? So we've shifted from cost arbitrage to talent arbitrage. So what are the risks? The first one, talent availability, capability, and employability. Like I said, one new center every week, 10 days, increasing number of tech centers, people coming in for digital talent. Everyone's vying for the same talent pool. So what does this mean? Are we all feeling comfortable about the availability? Is there surplus? Or should we be thinking about how to build that pipeline? Are we happy with the quality and the deployability of that talent? Or are we finding ourselves struggling with some of the greenhorns we recruit and then having to invest 6 to 12 months in getting them really ready? There is also, that's a big piece, and how are GCCs building this talent pipeline? We'll spend a few minutes talking about it, because there's a lot that all of you are doing in terms of sustaining the talent pool. There's a lot that's on the national agenda to sustain that. The second one is attracting and retaining top talent. You're all competing with one another for talent. You recognize that, right? Why should someone come to GCC A versus B? Why is your story and narrative more powerful than the GCC next door? Important to think about it. Do you have a differentiator? Do you have a proposition? And propositions are no longer only about employment policies. Everyone has that. Agile working model, it's a norm, it's basic. Compensation, given, because everyone's benchmarking. What differentiates you is going to be your strategic narrative of what's the purpose of your center. Why are you in India today? Are you here to leverage the low-cost delivery advantage? In which case, you're going to struggle to sustain talent. Are you here because you have a very powerful narrative where you're building what the future of your global organization represents? Superb. You're going to get more people in here. So we'll talk a little about what it takes to attract, but this is another one. Leadership talent. You will hear through the 2 days, GCC is moving up the value curve, trying to do more global work, global roles coming to India. There are reports that talk about 5,000 global leaders in India today, and that number projected to go to 30,000 in 2030. What does that mean? If you want to move up that curve, you want more global roles here, you're going to need a very solid talent pipeline at the leadership level. And that, by the way, is not readily available. You need to work on grooming and building it. Last, not the least, is cost arbitrage, which again is a risk, because how often have you been asked by your headquarters to say, again, wage bill increase? Is this really sustainable? Anyone heard that question? Is India's cost arbitrage shrinking? The point is, and we'll talk about it, and you will see this in our paper, the lens with which you use and view cost arbitrage has changed. It's no longer about headcounts moving and saving of cost. It's really about outcome and how you're driving the impact. The mantra is doing more with less. GCCs that set up 20, 25 years ago and went on for the next decade hired in hordes, thousands of people. That's not the model today. It's a hybrid model. You're leveraging your ecosystem, you're leveraging your partners to do it smartly, to pick and choose what you do. And of course, technology is disrupting very, very significantly. So these are some of the risks that our paper talks about. We also will move on to another slide that talks about what, and very briefly, unfortunately, the theme that I have covers talent, tech, regulatory, and concentration, four very diverse themes. So we're going to quickly skim over this. But here is some of what we are seeing GCCs do, and you can go through this in a little more detail in our paper. Digital skill analysis framework. Let me take a minute to say what that means. Quick question for you, and I would love a show of hands. How many of you have done an exercise to say, what will my talent pool look like in 2026? What will my talent profile look like? I see a few. Why is this important? It's critical. Because if you don't know what you're working towards, your workforce strategy and model is going to be hugely challenged. Your talent acquisition teams are going to continue to hire to backfill resources without thinking through the relevance of that skill. As we speak, the speed with which skills are getting sunsetted has gone up significantly. What was relevant 3 years ago is not relevant today, and what you need 2 years out is not available today. So how do you prep for what that future talent is? And it is all driven by the way, not an HR plan, it's driven by your technology roadmap. So what does your technology roadmap look like? Which processes are going to get automated? Those skills, by the way, will get redundant. Which platforms are going to replace today's platforms? You're going to have to reskill based on that. What are the new technologies you are adopting? And do you have people who can actually handle that for you? So very, very critical as you look to address this risk of talent, you've got to be acutely aware of where are you headed, what's going to be your talent ask, and how do you proactively work towards meeting that ask. So it's quite a significant piece. Second, hire, build, scale, borrow, augment, co-create. What is this saying to us? I covered it briefly. It's no longer about hiring. If you only focus on talent acquisition, you're a little out of sync with the trend. Today's workforce models require you to build and scale, require you to borrow, because it all depends on what are your talent requirements here and now. If they're only here and now, do not hire, borrow. There is a very large transient workforce from where you can borrow skills you don't need to hire. If it's medium to long term, you can either borrow or you could co-create. Work with partners. I'm not getting into it today, but you're familiar with the model. There's GCC, there's assisted build, there's BOT, managed services outsource. Figure out what works for you depending on your strategy, your functional scope, and what you want to adopt. So you can borrow. If it's long term, and that's the point, what is your future talent profile? That's where you will hire. So how innovatively are you moving around and keeping your model agile to keep with the times is going to be critical. Coming to leadership, there's a lot happening there. We're all familiar. GCC world is based on a very fundamental concept of moving roles, offshoring, and transitioning, right? But that model is changing. A lot of GCCs today run a very interesting two-in-a-box model, which means for every key role here, you have a counterpart role onshore. And you are joined at the hip. You are working seamlessly on common objectives, common KPIs, common KRAs. It's a great model to create that seamless extension of the parent which everyone aspires to be. It's also a great model to groom leadership. Because when you have that model, you're automatically exposed to another level of business context, of strategic thinking, of working with global leaders. So it's a very powerful model to groom your future leaders. GPOs, again, very important. What are GPOs? Global Process Owners. Again, a big trend that you will hear spoken of, all GCCs moving to end-to-end processing. The old days of payable, receivable, GL, no one, those are terms that have disappeared. Today, it's all about P2P, O2C, R2R. How are you driving this? How are you establishing global procurement COEs here? How are you establishing FP&A COEs here? So when you look at that kind of opportunity, that again, and we don't realize very often, but it's a great opportunity to groom leaders across the value chain. We don't do it consciously, so the reason we are highlighting these are great ways for you to step up your leadership band and get people to take global roles and move in that direction. Sorry, I had one more point there. Sorry. I will give you all a cue when we want to switch, please. Sorry, it's not so easy to toggle between two applications, as you all can see. And technology, interestingly, in the world of Gen AI and all that, but we're still toggling two apps. I cannot embed Menti within PPT. Can you imagine that? And we're going to talk about that, a very small example of tech risk. When you look at a tech stack and you have all these different applications, this is a very silly example of it, but it's true. I cannot embed Menti within PPT, okay? So coming back to the last one, debunking the cost arbitrage myth, our paper talks a little about it. Firstly, I must clarify that in the survey we ran, only a small 20% of the pool believed that concentration was a risk. And that came from largely the BFSI sector, who for regulatory reasons were concerned. Also concerned because today it is amongst our most mature sectors in GCC. So large scale, some of them have very significant part of their functional workforce sitting here. So there was a little bit of concern there. It also came from the technology sector, who again have large workforces, sometimes very large parts of their organization running products, teams out of here. So those were the only two. But by and large, most people believed concentration is a perceived risk. It is not a real risk. People believed, in fact, we had someone tell us, if anyone's looking at India as a country, you're mistaken. So don't call India a country and put it in a concentration risk bracket. India is a region. India is a region of its own. And most players have very smartly managed and mitigated the risk across multiple centers and how they've managed that. But concentration risk, and we'll talk about it later. The reason I brought it up is from a cost arbitrage perspective. It also gets spoken of because cost arbitrage coming in here and driving the growth. But this question on what is it doing? So very quickly, sorry I digressed for a minute, but on cost arbitrage, if I may spend a minute, like I said, we've seen wages increase, right? For digital skills, specifically, they've gone up. We've seen those numbers go up, but by the way, this has gone up globally. It's not just in India. Yeah, so keep that in mind. So at leadership, top functional leader, GCC leader level, we're very comparable. But what we bring in terms of experience, I think is quite unmatched. At the execution layer, we're still not there. We have a long way to go. But last, not the least, on the cost arbitrage risk that I'd like to call out is that when you look at cost arbitrage, you have to look again at a different lens. Go through our paper, you will see a few pointers because it's, as you look at talent arbitrage, you're suddenly going to shift the focus. When you look at defining outcome and value in a different way, you're going to shift the focus. And that's really, really critical. Yeah? Let's move on. A quick question, having seen what people are doing to actually mitigate the talent risk, tell us how you believe, how ready you are. How well do you know where your talent profile for the next 2 years, where it's headed? How ready are you to actually gear up to get there? So what are you doing to prepare? Or having heard some of what we said, do you genuinely feel you're a little underprepared? By the way, this is anonymous, but would love to hear you give your candid views. No one's going to know who responded, but it gives us a pulse for where the industry is. Work in progress, yeah. But this was the point of highlighting and spending as much time on talent, because talent is your #1 opportunity. It's also the risk. If you don't manage it well, you're going to struggle to sustain the advantage you've created. And I think the results are kind of speaking for itself. So I would urge you all to spend a little time, begin to project what your future looks like, start working towards that in a very structured manner. Okay, thank you for that. We're going to move quickly to the next. I took a little more time on this one because this is the #1 risk. It was top of mind of everyone we surveyed, and you can see why, because you've just confirmed what the outcomes are. Let's move to the next one on talent, on technology risk. You may wonder, why am I calling technology a risk? Because everyone's talking. The one most heard word you will see on this in this 2 days is what? Generative AI. Those of you who were at NTLF would have seen the buzz around it, right? And to be fair, the GCC model and industry is premised on technology. 25, 30 years ago, under the term of IT-enabled services, this was born. So it is technology-driven. The progress we have seen over a conference after conference is only driven by technology for the most part. So it is significant. It is the largest opportunity. But what are we going to talk about on this one? So let's move on. If we get to the next, GCCs are fast transforming, aided by new tech. So what was transaction delivery, value focus is moving into a very different game of innovation and transforming experiences. That's really the shift we're seeing. What you see at the bottom are just a few of the technologies that have driven this change. AI, ML, blockchain, IoT, AR, VR, there's tons of it. But you see these shelf lives changing. Last conference, lot around the metaverse. Have you heard the term? Yeah. Now? No more. Bots came, went. DevOps in one form, huge rage. But now people are, okay, what does it really mean? So what's the point we're making? Adopt technology, adopt emerging technology, but carefully. This needs to be underpinned by a very well thought through and well-defined technology strategy and roadmap. Let's take you through what our CEO survey, global CEO survey we did in 2023 actually pointed us to. We'll go to the next slide, please. 96% of tech leaders said that their technology function is ready to explore new technologies. And yet, 38% of the leaders said that they have leadership buy-in. Do you see the gap there? 70% of CEOs said Gen AI is their top investment priority. And they're expecting to do more with smaller budgets, okay? 57% of tech leaders believed that they're going to be important for them to achieve their objectives, and yet I correlate it to low level of buy-in. So what is all of this saying to us? And what's the opportunity before GCCs? At one level, doing more with less at a differential cost with higher talent and skill, that's a big opportunity before us. The concentration of technology, digital talent that India has to offer is unparalleled. So how do we make the most of it? There are a bunch of other risks, and our paper highlights them, whether it's regulatory and compliance risk, whether it's cyber threats, whether it is governance and ethics. And above all, I would say the risk of adopting a tech stack without thinking through it completely. Today we end up, and one of the problems we have in this quest of AI and Gen AI, every function in its own siloed way is adopting technology to excel that function. So imagine the business value chain. Your customer experience team is doing a bunch of things. Your procurement and supply chain teams are trying to innovate to actually do a few things. Your manufacturing team is embracing IoT. Your human resources is trying to build in cognitive layers to look at how do they predict employee mood, attrition, blah, blah, blah. So just think through what is this tech stack shaping up to be. How are all of these getting integrated? Are you thinking through the slightly outward use of how this is going to pan out in the next 2 years? Because if not, you're going to find yourself building and then unbuilding or undoing things you've done to kind of stay fit for purpose. So there is a risk with this. With every new technology comes a new risk. And by the way, speaking to the hybrid ecosystem, with GCCs leveraging the ecosystem, you are also exposing yourself to third-party risk. Don't forget that. So all of you are constantly figuring out, should I do this myself? Should I outsource? In-source, outsource is a constant flux. That adds to the dynamic. And then above all, and I don't want to undermine or talk less, but ethics is a big point, right? It's scary. I mean, I'm sure all of us have enough personal experiences of the scares around what technology can do to you. Whether it is from an identity perspective, whether it is in terms of misrepresentation, whether it is in terms of usage of data which is being proliferated in ways that need guardrails. So there are risks with technology. So as you, and innovation is big, right? But the risk we run is, as a nation, sometimes, I'm sorry, pardon me, I don't mean to generalize, but innovation can take a very jugadu approach, if you know what I mean. Here and now, let's innovate to optimize. Can we crunch this cycle time? Can we reduce some headcount? How do we innovate for here and now, which needs to change to the innovate for the future to make truly an incremental difference? Because if you don't, you're going to be undoing a bunch of things you've done. So technology comes with these risks. They need to be thought through. We'll move on, and like I said, the paper talks about this in a little more detail, but we hence say you need to rethink, redefine, and reimagine. As you look at your ecosystem, as you need to have a very clear strategy and roadmap. You need to look at how your workforce is going to come together to deliver to that ask. And then you need to look at rethinking, what is your model going to be? What are you building for yourselves? And where will you borrow and lean on someone else? What are your skills of the future? How are you going to redefine, not just, we all talk about customer experience, employee experience, but how are you redefining your model and the ecosystem you work with? These are some important elements, and reimagine, of course, reimagine the proposition. So all of this is a little bit of crystal ball gazing, looking outside, but have that plan before you start jumping and in a hurry adopting. So don't rush into new tech because it is, or emerging tech because it is trendy. Remember, as an industry, we have made some of those mistakes in the past. You know, adopting bots undermined our core platforms. Don't make those mistakes, get into it. It's a huge opportunity, but it requires deliberate, cautious adoption. Yeah? We're going to move on to the next theme, which is regulations. Sorry, slight lag. Sorry, we have 1 Mentimeter. Sorry, my bad. So go back to this. So what are the top challenges that you are facing? So having given you that landscape of new tech, and since we're all here to learn on new tech, tell us a little about when you're looking to adopt some of that new technology, what are the challenges you're facing? Or where do you see the challenges, the risks? Take us through a little bit of that. Quickly, again, a word cloud here, but give us a sense of what's top of the mind concerns you have. No, not this one, the previous question, yeah. What are the top challenges faced as you work on leveraging emerging technology? By the way, stay logged on to Mentimeter. Please don't log off. We need you on that till the end. A few more questions and we'll be done, but please stay logged on. Talent, security, yes, of course. People reluctance. Change management, by the way, big one. Technologies can change, but unfortunately, people don't want to change as rapidly, and that's a big concern. Security, there are lots of sessions that you're going to hear it being spoken of, so look out for that, yeah? By the way, and I will highlight, as you go through the event, you will see lots of technology players talking about their tools. You will see a bunch of organizations and interesting things happening. I myself find that very exciting. We also, by the way, have a little bit where we are evaluating people on their AI maturity curve. So lots of opportunities to learn, to self-assess and reflect on where you are. Okay, so like you can see, security, talent, change management are the top risks, bunch of others, and at some point maybe we'll figure with NASSCOM how we can summarize some of these learnings and put it out so you have something to take away from the session today. With that, let's quickly move into the risk on the regulation side. Now again, you could argue with me to say, is it a risk or is it just something that we all need to work with, correct? Because the regulations are defined, we have to align to it and we have to work with it. The reason it appeared top of the mind for most GCC leaders we surveyed, not for anything, but they believe there's an opportunity for it to become even easier to do business here, to make it more seamless, to make it simpler. We talk about GCCs moving up the value curve, but what would a tax authority say when they see that? As you make more global roles here, more global decisions, do you run a PE risk? You do. So how do you manage that? When you look at how you're setting up your organization, lots of options that the government puts before us. There used to be the SEZ, which was very popular. It's lived its life. There is Gift City, which offers a new set of advantages. But more importantly, what are some of those considerations? So if you go to the next slide, these were some of the top considerations that GCCs felt they were working with and had to kind of weave into their approach. So whether it is transfer pricing regulations, how are you defining your chargeback models, what does PE risk implications mean, and how do you continuously watch out for that? SEZ laws and STPI, we have all kind of gone through a phase of being exhausted with some of the implications there. But some of this we have to live with, and live with for a bit. Why are we calling this out? Because while they are imperatives you have to manage, if you do this smartly, you can weave it into your strategy, into how you approach your operating model, into how you define and track these carefully. So it's really about being prepared to do this better. There is, of course, a whole nother group. NASSCOM policy team themselves work with the government to try and make this simpler. Every state government is trying to make enhance the ease of doing business. Like, Karnataka just is launching its GCC policy to kind of ease off a few things. But you need to be very conscious of some of these, whether it's labor laws. Of course, we could say labor laws coming, not coming. We don't know where it is. There's a lot of people who say, can we just scrap it because it's going to disrupt more than anything else. But that's just a point of view. Fact is, if it comes in, we've got to be prepared. DPDPA, critical one, more and more critical given where GCCs are going. But I think people are very conscious because we've gone through the GDPR phase, right? most GCCs, being global organizations, have lived through that phase. They know what it takes and are doing well. I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are a whole bunch. And we need to constantly look at your model, your strategy. How are you considering this? So if we kind of go to the next slide, and I'm not going to spend time on it because it's a very busy slide. It will be in the paper that you will get. There are a whole bunch of things that you need to do to make sure that you are compliant and you have a framework at a governance level. Let's put it all up, operating and a monitoring level. These are simple tasks, but which help bring it together. You could say it looks excessive. Each of them have a very meaningful role to play in terms of how you navigate this and how you make life simpler. Bunch of GCCs are doing this very well already, whether it is how you define your roles, how you look at the implication of what you're setting up in India and what that could mean, right? Going through that whole journey. So third-party compliance, and all of these very closely linked to your strategy and operating model. So every time you look at in-source, outsource, automatically is someone looking at third-party risk for you? Or does that come as an afterthought? Every time you look at a new scope of work coming in, what is the consideration there you need to look at? How are you looking at your chargebacks, your pricing model, your scope definition? So the point I'm making is that the business as it runs, as you run business as usual, there are implications you need to be aware of. The sooner you adopt a framework that helps you do this, the better prepared you're going to be, because it just will be BAU for you, right? With that, another quick mentee for you all, and we'll quickly go to that, to say that if you now look at different aspects of regulations, compliances that you need to watch out for and constantly understand them better, tell us a little about how prepared are you to deal with this. Are you actually super proactive in the way you're managing and identifying this? Are you working your way through it so you're developing a model and it's WIP? Or are you just managing it on a need basis? Okay, so let's take a look. And it's interesting because there's a large chunk. So the first two, good to see, is a 50-50 between proactive, but there's still a very large chunk sitting in managing on a need basis. And that's the point of why this is a risk. Because if you don't understand this, if you don't have a focus on it, if you don't have a framework and a mechanism to monitor and weave it into how you run your business, you're going to struggle with this. And it's always going to feel like a real painful area to deal with. You get it, right? So it's about how you manage this. It is top of the mind risk or challenge. I would say more a challenge. People are pained by it. But yet, not enough is being done to manage this proactively. And that's really the point. Last, not the least, is the last area we're going to talk about is the concentration risk. I think accidentally I spoke about it in an earlier section. For those of you who are paying attention and realized the miss and wondering, oh, why is she talking concentration when the slide says cost arbitrage? That's what happens when you wake up at 5 in the morning. So pardon me for that, but we're going to talk quickly about concentration risk. I've covered it to a large extent. I talked about it in the introduction. Because when we host these global organizations, and there are 2-3 global C-suite who come in every week, their first thing is, oh, everyone's coming to India. They then drive through our metros, which are not fun to drive through, and they say, is this really where we want to be? Is there a huge concentration risk? What does this mean? Oh, y'all are in election year, should we be worried? There are lots of questions that get raised. But the fact is, of course, from a economy and political level, personal view that India is on a very solid footing. Our fundamentals are solid. What we have is quite unparalleled compared to anyone else. If you just look at our working age population, if you look at the pace at which we're embracing technology, skilling our people. So I think this advantage is here to stay. The paper will tell you a little more about what the government is doing to actually enhance this. So next time someone asks you this, you should talk about it. Let's move to the next slide, please. Headcount alone, sorry, the font's gone for a bit of a toss. Headcount alone is not a strong indicator of concentration risk. I want you all to remember this. The paper will give you a bunch of other surrogate variables of how concentration is measured. Because you have 10,000 people here, that need not mean concentration risk. It is very closely linked to the scope. It is closely linked to the purpose and what you're delivering out of here, the functions you're delivering out of here. It's linked to how you're managing those 10,000 people and what kind of risk and security layers do you have to actually manage this team. So concentration can be a very big word, but there's a lot of nuances. You need to delayer this. Like I said, 20% only believed, less than 20%, that it was a concern, and that was BFSI for reasons I called out, technology, because these are large-scale organizations that today have a significant percentage of their workforce here. By the way, when you look at concentration, you also need to look at what your GCC has versus what your service provider has. So you need to balance all of that and then assess this risk. But the truth be told, 89% of the GCCs are today increasing their footprint only in India or largely in India. So despite all else, this is which is growing, this is the top destination, and hence we'd like to sum up by saying concentration is really a perceived risk more than anything, but it needs to be managed. So let's talk a little about how this needs to be managed, and the next slide actually gives you a quick framework to say, firstly, when someone raises this, please spend a minute to understand what is the concern. If someone is saying, why India, are we too heavily invested in India, understand it a little better. Where are you coming from? What is the concern? Then look at addressing that through a multi-pronged approach in terms of how are you actually addressing this risk? What does it have to do with your operating model, your future plans? Make sure that you're having a regular communication reporting on addressing this proactively. Because like we said, for various reasons, it's a perceived risk. The paper will give you a sense of many metrics that you can look at as you look to gauge and assess yourself against this. Mitigate and strengthen business resiliency is a big reason why, way of mitigating this risk. To say, yes, we're a large team, but here are all the other things that we're doing. You may be aware, and you would see, there are a bunch of other publications, nasscom themselves, and we do this with nasscom 3 years in a row on the Secure in India report. It's a very interesting report. It's focused on GCCs and how are you further securing the environment, not just for yourself, but for global, out of India. Hence, a big mitigant in terms of addressing some of this. So this is a perceived risk, but worth addressing proactively. Yeah? So those are the top 4 risks that we've spoken of today. We've covered the themes. The paper, like I said, talks in a little more detail. But this is something that we believe in all the bullishness to grow the trajectory, we need to navigate this, keeping this dynamic risk landscape in mind. There are guardrails you need to define, you need to strengthen your systems, you need to be more aware. For whatever it's worth, this pretty packed room, and you saw the responses to the survey, most of them actually said to us that there's a need to focus more on it. So every time you're looking at new scope, what else can I do from my GCC? Can I add more headcount? You need to consciously weave this into your thinking and address these risks proactively and alongside all else. Yeah? With that, we're going to kind of wrap up with just 2 other quick mentees. The next one is really about, there's one more. What are the critical enablers you believe are going to take you to the next level of maturity? For those of you who were with us last year, the theme we presented was the GCC maturity model. We have it displayed this time too. And it talks about some very interesting levers. So if you go to your Mentimeter, there are a bunch of dimensions that help you move up the maturity curve. It is strategic alignment to the headquarters, governance and empowerment. It is looking at talent, your workforce readiness, cost differentiator. So what are things that you believe are going to take you to that next level of maturity? What is the common theme, by the way, if you noticed all your responses from today's session? Talent. Talent has been the largest word that we've seen across all the slides. Strategic alignment. We spoke about it from a technology perspective. If you're not aligned, if you don't have strategy, roadmap, clarity, you're going to struggle. You're going to undo a bunch of things you're doing. So that's great, because that just gives us a sense of workforce readiness. So we're seeing a lot of the themes kind of converge, because if you've got to move up to the next level, take advantage of the levers that the industry offers and address some of what we've spoken of today. So with that, and I know our Hosts are standing and indicating to me now to shut up, so I will stop, but would love for one last question to say, if you had to sum up 3 takeaways from this session, what would they be? By the way, this is an exercise I do through the 2 days at nasscom, because every session you attend, very useful to sum up, what did you learn that was new, what are you taking away from it, because that's how you'll summarize the 2 days you've invested at this wonderful event. GCC, future of India, scalable model, types of risk, talent. Okay, cool. All right. Well, that is the last, and I hope you found this useful. It was meant to paint the picture of what are these emerging risks, how do you navigate, what are others doing, and how do you stay clued into addressing this as you continue to grow at the rapid pace you are. So thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the 2 days. I think it's a great platform to learn, network, and take away a whole lot. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, they're allowing time for a few questions. So if there are any, would be happy to address. Yes, please. Yeah.
You talked about augmenting talents, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to scale and all that. Those who are in the industry of providing augmented services,
yeah.
What are your thoughts on? I mean,
I think it's a great industry to be in. I work very closely with the Indian Staffing Federation as well. So ISF does a lot. The fact is, this demand isn't tapering down. The next 3 years and beyond is going to continue to see growth. And those who do this smartly are going to lean on talent from external to borrow that talent as they need so that they don't straddle themselves with headcount. So I think the future looks very bullish. It's a good place to be. But the only word of caution is, as you approach your clients, understand their needs better. Try and improve the acceptance ratios. We work with a few, and if you look at the long list, if you have to go through 300 profiles to pick and make 3 offers, it's not a good place to be. So just get more clued into the client's need. Don't look at it as a generic skill. Understand the context better.
So when can we get away from the interview model?
Well, given where technology is going, we may already be, but I think that's a little scary, because the thought of you don't know who you assessed and who comes in is a risk that's still very real.
I think that's going to be a huge challenge for scale.
Yeah, so, but I think technology, we've seen some of the downsides of that, right? I mean, but we'll have to, all I'm saying is I think there's a lot of opportunity, but it needs to be steered through carefully. Sure.
Hi, Shalini.
Hi.
Always good to hear you for a change from this side of the room. Very interesting to see your presentation and the cloud, come up. Pretty much everyone seems to be needing to have their strategy, but at the same time, the challenges seems to be similar, which is talent, risk, etc.
Yeah.
So what would be your 2 words, given your experience, as to how do one look at differentiating their strategy compared to some of the others from a GCC?
So, in my view, it's not like you're competing. See, and I'll say it on a lighter note, it's not like the competition between the big 4, where you have to differentiate to a client between one another. What are you differentiating here for? You're differentiating for talent. So you are trying to attract talent, and what attracts talent is meaningful, purposeful work. Number 1, are they joining you because they feel they're coming to do some really good work, because you're going to add something new and some new skills to their profile? That's their biggest reason. Second reason, are you someone who can show them a career path and opportunities? In my mind, those are the top 2, with learning alongside. Those 3. Everything else, compensation, policy, are must-haves and they're enablers, but those 3 differentiate. And that is differentiated if you are very clear on what's the purpose of your global organization to have set you up here. Needs to be a powerful reason. If you are here because you're a low-cost delivery center, you will struggle to attract. I was at and I won't quote name who, but a recently set up center whose tagline as you walked in to say, we're here today to build for what's tomorrow. Just the sound of it made you want to go in and say, wow, this sounds like I want to be part of this story. So I'm just giving you one example. So I think those three would differentiate. There's one question there and then we can stop. Last one? Okay. We'll catch up offline. But thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.